Hello and welcome to Flooring Model Kit Review Time. Today we've got Italeri's latest release. This is the 1/9 scale Suzuki RG500 or the XR27, which is the Heron Team 1978 Barry Sheen bike. Now, if this looks a little bit familiar, this is actually somewhat of a classic. It's from back in date 1980s, 1981, something else like that, and it's by Protar. So Protar back in the day did large-scale bikes very, very nicely. And bearing in mind, this kit is now, as you say, a few years old, shall we say. You know, we can expect to see something not exactly crisp and sharp that we might expect from perhaps modern manufacturers, but definitely this is one of those kits which is really nice to see again because you just don't see it, and that is the point. So as we can see, nice box art, clean box art compared to I think what the old one used to be. And again, you've got your kit number for this one, which is number 4644. Again, some of the details around with the bike. We've got a nice big sheet down in there for your decals. You've got it roughly on the size of this one, which is that usual thing around about sort of 22 centimetres. And some other details back on there as well. And again, we've got some of the colour call-outs that you're needing. All right, so this is sealed, never been in here before. So if we can get this to cut, it's just a two. Okay, so in the box, we are greeted by Italeri's usual way. So we've got, well, they're very nice and glossy, some very nice decals. We've got the instructions, and then we've got the markings on the back there like that. And then down in here, pretty much standard sort of Protar, which was amazing back in the day. We've got, obviously, these are pre-done for you in the sort of metal colours. And then we've got a bag of bits and screws and springs. We've got some hosing for piping. We've got a bar and various things like that, which is quite nice. And again, it's sort of separately bagged. So we've got the sort of chassis and the various bits down in there like that. We've got the chain, which obviously that's the chain, a little bit of close-up. Again, it's one of these things, you normally don't get them. We'll look at it properly, but it's really nice to see it down in here. We've got the seat and a couple of bits down in there like that. We've got the body parts and the clear parts in there like that. We have the tyres, which clearly, obviously you can see vinyl tyres. And then again, we've got coloured wheels, and then obviously you've got the engine itself and the bits and pieces down in there. So as always, we'll start off in the old instruction booklet and have a proper look through. So again, a little bit about the team and the bike itself, usual things like that. And then obviously down in here we've got the parts call out, and again some of this is greyed out because it's not used. There is different versions of this kit out there, things like that as well, so you take notice of those and you understand why we've got any of those bits left over. We've got the piping, so you've got thin and large, the screws, the various things, and it's got all the dimensions up here as well. And again, same down in here. If I remember rightly, these are almost 1-to-1 scale, so you can just put them across and make sure you got the right scale, things like that. Here it's talking about obviously sanding down the tyres to give them that more worn look, get rid of the centre seam, usual bits and pieces like that. And then really it's straightforward into the wheel. So you're putting down in here, we've obviously got the drives, and then obviously we've got the brake system being fitted down onto that one. And then down in here we've got the actual engine going together. We've got various assemblies, as you can see down in here, with nuts and bolts and tools and screws and all the various things in here, so you can see how these parts go together. All right, putting the actual engine in, and bearing in mind this is a 1980s kit. I think this came out really early 80s, so again this was cutting edge back in the day. It was very, very nicely done. So you can see quite old school things down in here, like talking about razor blades for cutting down the springs and various things like that as well. So you've got your lengths of springs and then cutting them down, as you might imagine. But that is then to go on here for the carb, the various bits and pieces. It really is a very, very detailed, you know, 4-cylinder engine down into these. So again, it's showing you the alignments of how it all goes in. So very nice to see. Then we got the main chassis, obviously, of it all going together, and then adding obviously all the details that are going to go into this. And again, we've got this chain system and the way that works. We'll have a good look at that in a moment. But you can probably see you've got old school and what were total cutting edge. So down in here, you're using the old hot screwdriver to melt the nubs in to flatten it off and things like that once they're in position. And then you got stuff that you just never see. So we got like a vinyl chain system with adding links into it and then joining it together to get them round and all these different things, which was brilliant. Lots of nuts and bolts and screws, as you can see as well, which are used in the construction for mounting the actual engine to the chassis, which again gives a fantastic sense of realism and scale when you're actually putting it together as well. So that's really, really nice. Again, down in the hosing system for on the radiators, the various bits and pieces for this one as well. Lots of details going down, as you might imagine, right the way through. Got the shock absorbers, all the bits and pieces. Then it's talking about obviously masking up down in here for putting some of the various parts in this one and sanding off details and stuff. So you're just going to follow this around to get these in. This is that seat system being then fitted in and glued in the back. And then obviously it's talking about the painting, the masking of it off and showing you about those in these details around here, and then getting those obviously the decals onto it as well. So very, very nice indeed. Again, more hosing, as you might imagine, going in, making up all the lines onto this one. It's obviously talking about them going through the manifolds and systems down in there like that, so forth and so on. Again, these springs that we were making up, those are all being fitted down into there. Obviously, we've got all the sparks tubes and the HT leads and everything else like that. Again, all being fitted down into this one. So again, I think you agree, it was light years ahead of its time, right the way through down in here to the forks with the springs that go into them and all the different parts that are making these up, and then all of this detail that goes down into this. So again, great work right the way through. And then finally, as you can see, we've got some of the final parts coming together, and again talking about the painting, the masking and the decaling of all the various things. So we've got the fuel tank being fitted down on the top, more hoses and various bits and pieces, you can imagine, going down there in the bottom, the decals then going around the fairings, and then we've got a stand at the back and the other bits and pieces all on the front, various things like that. So as you can see, it's a very, very detailed kit. Then you obviously got the markings. This is the classic, obviously the Barry Sheen version, as you can see down onto this one with the number 7 Suzuki. So again, down in here, colour call outs, various things, and away you go. So again, this is one of those kits. It's an old kit. The great thing about it is it's a really good kit. So sometimes we see reboxing of stuff that's come back for the last 20, 30, 40 years, things like that. And you look at it and you're thinking, it's 40 years old, it's awful. This is where, to be honest, Protart were light years ahead. They've always been top gauge. You know, obviously one of these companies, you do pay a little bit more for them, things like that back in the day and everything else. But now obviously Italeri is coming along and putting them out and bringing what is not available. And that's the nice things to it. And again, putting a little edge onto this one, obviously with the decals, with Italeri going through on these ones, as you can see, beautiful, clear, solid decals on all of these. So we've got the Michelin ones, obviously with the Suzuki, you know, with Fabergé and all the rest of it, as you can see down on these, beautifully, nicely done. Champion, Texaco, all the classics right the way down in here. So again, it's one of those ones where, you know, old meets new. So the decals are light years ahead as they used to be. Okay, so where should we start? I'll tell you what, we'll start somewhere a little bit different. Let's have a look at the tyres. So you have got this whacking great seam onto these. But again, if you look at this, you catch it in the writing, you have got the Michelin actually done in here. We've got the tyre size down on here, all the information you would need right the way through on these. So it's really, really nice to see it follows through. Yes, you have got this area down in this one. Okay, it's easy to get rid of. You're going to be cutting that back and sanding it. And again, on this scale, it's quite straightforward. Just remember, don't use a fine grade sander, use a heavy grade sander. So you want something with plenty of bite, and then that way it will just tear it. If you use a too fine a grit, what can happen is you end up melting it and it just rolls up in balls and it doesn't really, you know, take it down a little bit. So that's you do. The other thing is where you pop them in the freezer and get them to freeze. One question that does come up time and time again about rubber tyres over time, they disintegrate. They probably did in the 1980s, but I'm sure this will be a more modern version of vinyl that shouldn't end up turning into a puddle of resin or yellow underneath your actual bike. These are pretty good these days, not like the old ones used to be. Whilst we're looking at that, obviously we've got the rubber seat back here, which you're going to be moulding into shape and all the rest of it. We've got these couple of pins, but more importantly, down in here, you can probably see we have the chain. So you can actually see this is a pliable, workable chain system that's done in vinyl. Again, cutting edge to be able to produce this in vinyl and get this out at such a small scale, even though this is a very last 1/9 scale kit, to do a chain in it, that was something else. So back in the day, total cutting edge again. Really very, very nice indeed. So that's lovely. Right, so I'm not going to bother getting all these bits and pieces out because you can see them just down in here. But again, this is all your nuts and your bolts and your various things going down in here, your vinyls, different sizes. We've got this sort of carbon fibre effect bar down in here and various things. And again, these springs which you're going to cut and then loop the ends as well to actually be working areas on the bike. That's what this is all about. Again, you don't want to lose any of these bits, but they are one-to-one scale with the drawing, so they're quite straightforward of actually bringing it together and things like that. So again, absolute cutting edge for the day. And then we are into the parts. So if we just start in this one and then we'll work our way through. So some of the small ones, as you can see, the details on this, again, this is actually now exactly a 40-year-old kit. So, you know, again, absolute cutting edge for back in the day. Really very, very nice. And that's when sometimes it's really nice to see these old sort of classic kits come back, because they still really are good by today's standard even. Yes, okay, it needs a little bit of working. Yes, you are going to find the odd ejecting pin. Yes, you're going to get the odd bit of flash. But generally you accept all of these things because you're going for what is the best bike out there still in its scale and its series. So definitely, as you can see, that's all those parts. And again, down in here, you can probably see we've got the chassis parts, you know, and it's little attentions to detail like the beading of the welding down in here and up here. Beautifully done. You've got it just down the back here. How nice that is. Even by today's standard, 40 years later, you don't get companies doing things like that. So again, very, very nicely done. Again, even on the blind side, it's nice, it's sharp. The details are all there, and yes, it has got some pretty nasty burnishing between the levels. This is this line that runs down in here, but again, you know, scrape cleaning is your friend with that. Clean that up and you'll be absolutely good to go in no time at all. Right, and then we are down into here. I don't usually get in, so let's just do this. Okay, so again, we're working our way through the colours. Let's start with the gold wheels. The hubs and the various parts. Again, really nice indeed. Very nice details on those. So that's nice. We've got the actual engine block itself and the various items onto it. As you can see, it's just a little bit of flash all round in here, but the parts themselves generally are pretty clean. No real problem with these on here, as you can sort of see. So again, never be put off by flash. If it's not on the parts and it's not ruining something completely and it's a right headache, you know, if you had flash all around the sort of sprocket, then fair enough. But you haven't, so it's fine. But again, looking down in here, you got some of the embossing onto the actual parts as well. Lovely detail. Oops. And then on here, as we fly that off, there's an exhaust. And again, this is a one piece, but it's hollow as well. Exhaust. So again, yes, you got a seam down, but obviously you're going to be checking this because manufacturing they could have something like this as well. But that's the exhaust system, one of the forks, obviously being a 4-cylinder, and here they are down in here like that. Really very, very nicely done. So again, it's one of those ones where really good sharp details all the way through. Very nice indeed. There's that radiator. Again, it's really hard to find fault because it has got faults, don't get me wrong, this isn't a perfect kit, but when you take into account it's 40 years old, it's very hard to have a go at something that's 40 years old, because if you cast your mind back to what kits were like 40 years ago, this was beautiful, absolutely stunning. So in here we've got clear parts and we've got the main fairings and fuel tanks and various things. Again, I think if we just start at the top, you can see really nicely done. It's not as clean and as sharp as we see modern, but again, by the time you've given this a polish up, primed it and painted it, it'll be absolutely beautiful right the way through. And again, you've got these little edges and things like that, but this is stuff you can take care of with a polish. And even on the inside, again, legendary for it. No real ejector pins down these. Yes, it's up there, but you're not going to see that. Yes, it's over here, but you're not going to see that. All the bits you can sort of see are devoid of them, which is really very, very nice indeed. And again, we've got a small seam line running across the top of the front wheel, but obviously that there be polished out and you are good to go, because again, on the inside there's nothing. So again, you know, when you're casting your mind back of what kits were like back in the day, then you will be fine for it. So again, the clear, obviously, part on the top. Again, you're always going to get this little shape issues and things like that, and it's been brought to my attention some of them have a dent in and things like that. I can't see that. There's no dent in here. That's just because of the thickness of the and depression in here. It's always better to look into the underside looking out than it is out on these. But I can't see any problems with that at all. Got a nice good curve on the top. And the part, so actually that's looking pretty darn good. And again, it's a complex shape to do. It's very thin and very nicely done. So very good with that, the clear parts. So last one up here is just the pre-done, the best way to come into these. So again, being protected, a little bit of tape just down on here. These are the chromed parts. And they're okay. Camera hates these, but there we go. As you can see, pretty nice indeed. And there you have it. I have to say, this is one of those ones, Protar kits are sort of legendary back in the day. When you're back into the 80s and then obviously into the 90s. And I remember as a kid looking at Protar kits in the model shop, and they were the thing of dreams because they were very, very expensive and they were always at the top shelf. And as a younger modeler back in the days, being a teenager, you weren't allowed to touch those and all the rest of it. That was for the men, you know, they was the ones who used to do those. And they were legendary back in the day. And I'd seen a few built up and things like that as well. And they always looked amazing, but totally out of my skill set, totally out of my price range. But again, they are back and they are beautiful kits, and it's one of those few kits that you can take from 40 years ago, stick it on a shelf now, and by the time you build it and you do it, a little bit of work, I'm not saying it's perfect by a long way, but obviously a little bit of work into this one, you will churn out a very detailed, extremely nice kit that always goes together very well, because Protar are pretty legendary for their kits being very nice to put together as well. And now you can get it again, which is the nice thing about it. So Italeri have come along and re-released obviously the 1/9 one like this, and it is just legendary. So it's one of those ones, if you're a bike builder or you know you're into your classic, your Barry Sheens and things like that, it's going to be an absolute must for you. So there we go, lovely kit, everybody should have one. That's the Italeri 1/9 scale RG500 Suzuki Barry Sheen.